So I am Jan Jorgensen at Sound and Light Healing Arts, and that's exactly what it is, using vibration to change the world for good. And I have the king, this gentleman, Don Estes, not only understands it. I mean, look at that poster behind him. This guy is a brainiac, left-brained. He understands how the universe, the grid, the galactic, the universal, the entire web all works together. And he was way ahead of the parade decades ago. I am so thrilled to have a little time to sit down and catch up, because when I met Dawn, I was frustrated that I couldn't actually show that a woman's voice was her calling card to the world. Her fear, her consciousness, and what she resonated out into her voice is what she would repeat back. We'll talk about that more later, but that's how I came into this wonderful man's life, and he is so generous. Don, you have always made the time to answer emails and be a colleague, and I'm so thankful for that. So before I do the official recognition, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. It's been a while since you and I have talked.
Yes, it has. And we're talking silver hair. We're talking lots of changes in our work. And before we began record, we were talking about the world is catching up with the idea and understanding of vibration. It's particularly applied vibration, which Dawn has gone way into the future decades ago, and now people are finally getting an understanding. So I would like to give a formal introduction to this beautiful soul. Don Estes currently serves, and Don, you can update things. This is off the website, and I know things change in a nanosecond with you. Don Estes currently serves as CEO and director of Inner Sense Incorporated and Physiometric Science Incorporated, certified medical technologist, laboratory director, and neuroscientist. He has lectured worldwide on sensory science, vibrational medicine, appearing on CNN, NBC, ABC, Entertainment Tonight, Science Frontiers, Discovery Channel, Next Step, which won an Emmy Award in 1994. Significantly, you recently made a beautiful piece about the voice in my colleague and spiritual teacher's movie, Carolyn Corey's movie, helping us understand the super sensory abilities that we all have. Don is the inventor of vibrosound sensory resonance technologies used by both professionals and non-professionals for music, sound therapy, relaxation, entertainment, and expanded states of mind. His theories include proprietary knowledge and patents in the fields of light, color, sound, music, and algorithmic automata. So this is my world and my language on steroids. So when Dawn is around, we open our ears and our hearts and we just receive this master's information. So Dawn, I actually am not sitting at my desk as I usually sit for interviews. I'm sitting in my easy chair. Why? Because I'm ready to receive your information and what you're feeling is most important to bring through. I hope you talk about the portico, which was our initial connection that helps a woman understand her consciousness and how she approaches the world through her voice. I hand over the microphone to you, buddy.
Thank you so much. It's so really great to be here. And by the way, nice necklace that you have there. Very beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, here we are. Maybe, I guess I probably met you the first time at the 2018 and 8 global sound healing conference, I believe, somewhere along in there.
Yes.
And like you said, the world is just changing so fast, it's hard for anybody to keep up with it. But we've come a long ways since the old days. I don't know how much of my story you really want me to share of how it all started. Um, but I could share a little bit of that if you like.
Yes, please.
The the I guess I've been really involved in music and sound really since the really early on. Um, like all great guys of the 60s, I had my own rock and roll band. I thought I was going to be a superstar, but then life strikes and you have to get a job. And I went off to college at that point, and the particular college that I went to was the one of the first schools where the psychology department was based on humanistic psychology instead of clinical psychology. So in those days, it was called Gestalt. These days, it's being called transpersonal psychology. And I've been doing a lot of teaching up at Sophia University there in Palo Alto with regarding transformational technologies. But some of the first things that happened was that I was studying, one of my favorite subjects was the sensory mechanisms and how the sensory mechanisms work. So all throughout college, I studied that. And I made some amazing, just off the cuff discoveries, one of which was when I was sitting on top of a famous guitar player's amplifier backstage at a concert. And I was actually feeling every nuance of his guitar in my body. I was sitting right on top of the amplifier, and I had stood in front of speakers before and felt the power of the bass, hit my chest, but I had never felt every little nuance in every cell of my body. And I thought, that is the coolest thing ever. So I rushed home. I had a waterbed at the time. I tore the thing apart. I went to Radio Shack and got a couple of big speakers and stuck in there. And that's how really the Vibrasound basically got started. And over the years, I think we're at our 13th generation now. But basically, it was a technology that allowed a person to feel sound. And I started realizing, man, music is something that's meant to be seen and felt and heard. It's not just to be listened to. You can experience it with every one of your senses. And then one day I was driving down the road. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I had my eyes closed. And all of a sudden, I thought I was having a flashback. It was like I had done psychedelics and I was tripping. And I thought, wow, I'm having a flashback of some sort. And I opened my eyes, and what was happening is that we were driving past a huge forest that where the trees had been planted specific different distances from each other. And the sun was setting behind them on the other side. So the sun was coming through those trees. And every time I passed a tree, the sunlight would go out. So I got this flashing kind of experience there. I went, wow, that is equal to any psychedelic experience I've ever done. And I probably should step back there and say this was back in the 60s before they made psychedelics illegal. And I was a chemistry student, so we were just making all that stuff in the laboratory. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I wanted to live there, but it was obvious that there's a compensatory lag time, and you can't keep getting to that state by doing it that way. So I had dedicated my life to coming up with some way of achieving that state of mind without having to pop a pill or take some kind of medicine to do it.
Natural.
But yeah, so I made the discovery about the Vibrasound, and then that day with the lights flashing, I thought that's the coolest thing ever. So I went home. This was before there was even LEDs or anything like that. So I went home and I took a pair of swim goggles, one of the big face swim goggles, And I fashioned out of plastic, I fashioned some little fans and I glued them in there so that these fans would spin around in front of my eyes. And I hooked a tube up to it to where I could blow into that and turn those little fans. And I went out into the sunlight and I did some breath work just by breathing into that. And it blew my mind. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the closest thing to a psychedelic experience I've ever experienced visually. So over the years, I guess I mentioned that we're in our 13th generation now. And so we've been through a lot of different hardware and software changes to perfect getting light into the person's eyes in specific ways to where we have control over every aspect of the vibration. And then my major work in school was along the lines of what I wound up calling sensory resonance. And I came up with a theory of what happens when you synchronize all of the senses together into one coherent experience. And over the years, I began to discover that there's a little bundle of nerves at the base of the brain called the reticular activating system that works as a relay station for all the sensory input coming in. And it's a wonderful mechanism. It's been really responsible for our survival, but it also blocks access to all the good stuff, all the feelings of peace and well-being and connectedness, and that you're on the right track and that you can trust fate and trust the universe to have your back and you don't need to worry about things.
Quick question. As
Okay.
a nurse and sound healer, I understood the RAS, reticular activating system, to be a gateway to your egoic brain to make sense of and categorize things and to set them aside as either safe or unsafe, which of course stops the entire process of the Gestalt oneness.
Exactly. It's almost like, for those Star Trek fans out there, it's almost like the human body is the Starship Enterprise. And all of those characters that were in that show were different parts of a person. And that part, the reticular activating system, is Captain Kirk. It only has two purposes or two reasons for being there. Number one is security. It wants to make sure that everything is safe and secure. And secondly, it wants sensory coherence. It wants everything to add up and fit the picture and make sense. If either one of those things were not true, in the movie, the captain would immediately start a committee and send some people down to the planet or figure out why things didn't add up or make sense. Also, if there was ever a threat to the ship, the shields went up immediately. But that was really his only main function, was those two things. And so I realized that the reticular activating system is that, and the goal is to get it out of the way.
It's a gatekeeper that keeps us from the transcendental experience,
Exactly.
keeps us based in this reality and this geometry, which is limited. And I know that your work is all resonance and access messaged through spiritual directives to move the game board towards more vibrational coherence for all humans living in a new paradigm. So, of course, this is your language to overcome the RAS.
Yes. And now I've said many, many times that I've always, since I started this, I've always wanted to call this a spiritual technology. But over the years, it's almost been impossible because most of my clients have been professionals or doctors or lawyers or other people that don't really have that real good, strong spiritual connection, or over the years haven't had that. I've always wanted to call it that. But lo and behold, now the world has finally caught up with us about that too. And I feel totally confident now of calling my technology a spiritual technology.
Did you see the Michael Beckwith and Bruce Lipton, Spirituality and Science Together? I mean, this is absolutely it because I've been a right brain, divine feminine, but I send people to you for the data and credibility. And I know that you understand that women like me are operating in that realm. So I thank you for the respect and the bridge
Mm.
that you two and I have built with each other over the years through different projects, workshops, and different things. And now it's finally out.
Finally here, yeah. Michael Beckwith is a great friend. He's come over a lot. In fact, he's the only person that I have ever seen um, put pure harmonics into the portico. I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but when I put pure harmonics into the portico, what you get back is a black screen, totally black screen with 12 concentric white rings on it. And I've never seen anybody do anything near that. I mean, you can sometimes see the rings that are there, but boy, he could sit down and start talking, and that whole thing would just light up with those rings. It's the only person I've ever seen that could do that. And so I know that spirituality has a lot to do with ordering your brain up.
And that's when you speak of that imaging, and I work with your program for 6 months in Marin with the program, understanding the visions and images on there and what it represented in the subconscious, community, personal, global. What you're describing with the resonance of his voice is the 0 point, and it allows the unfettered, unmitigated vibrational truth to come through, and that is the bell, the resonance that will change people's hearts on these planets. And well, it's the base of the work that I do with the voice of the feminine. And so by your saying this, we can actually see it and measure it. When I first met you, you said, Jan, you're only using 30% of your dominant frequency. I said, what? And you said there's a lot more to come in fleshing out of bringing your bigger frequency into your body so that you are this more powerful. So you're holding your own dominant frequency. And that made all the difference to me to search for that.
You know, it's very funny because over the years, even since I've met you, I've only found probably less than 100 people that can maintain dominant outward radiance like that. It's a very difficult thing to maintain and keep all the time. I find people that can hit it every once in a while when they're like right on with something, but it's hard to maintain um, your radiance and keep that going out into the world instead of becoming like a black hole and trying to draw everything into yourself.
Can you?
But
Um, oh, go ahead, finish that
or
thought.
I was just going to say, probably you realize that there is it's a double-edged sword, that dominant outward radiance thing. It's a wonderful thing because it allows you, basically, once you learn how to do it, you can create your own reality. The
Right.
problem with it is that if you forget that you're one of the very few that has such a talent, and you get around other people and you're in a bad place, they
Yes.
go with you.
Yeah.
And dominant outward radiators can actually go away by themselves and fix themselves, straighten themselves out, and then come back in. But when they do, they come back into everybody else, and they're like, wow, well, why is everybody else so upset? And they don't realize that they put them there, and it's a responsibility to have to pull them back out of there. So it is somewhat of a double-edged sword. You have to be conscious of having that kind of influence on other people.
And that's why the spiritual part of harm to none and good for all is part of the co creation path. I have a question for you because I know people are listening to this saying, well, how can the portico help me? Because I still have some healing rungs to go through. So, from the time that I first met you, when we
Mhm.
got my voice, my consciousness, and everything I felt about what I was saying that I really wasn't buying into, I remember a woman, Lauren, came into your world and she made it biofeedback and to mitigate and to move the frequencies within your body so you could release the miasms of old patterns. Can you just speak a little bit, give people hope that their
Mm.
voice isn't it for life?
Yeah, well, let me just back up to the very beginning of probably the greatest discovery that I ever made was that traditional medicine, the so-called allopathic medical paradigm, it basically says that there's something wrong and you got to find it and fix it. And this has always been the case since the beginning of medicine, because no one's ever been able to find the true harmony in a human biometric. Everybody's tried. They've used brain waves, they've used heartbeats, they've used the voice, but it's impossible to find the harmonic content of something like that, because the fundamental frequency, say, for example, of a human voice, like my voice right now, the fundamental frequency is jumping all over the place. It's like a musical instrument and it jumps all over the place. So you can't nail it down. And without nailing it down to know the true fundamental frequency, you cannot find the harmony. You got to find the fundamental frequency of all the other things that are there to be able to determine the harmony. So what they do instead, what everybody does instead, whether it's with brain waves or heart or the voice, they take a time sample and then they average the time sample. And they will turn around and they will tell you that's the fundamental frequency. But it really isn't. It's really the average frequency, or the mean or the mode of all of the frequencies are there. It has nothing to do with the fundamental frequency. So all of these voice analysis systems and brainwave analysis and heart rate analysis, they're all claiming to be able to find the fundamental frequency, but they're really not. They're just finding the average frequency, which has very little to do with the harmony. So several years ago, like really about actually 10 years ago, I guess now, we made a major discovery of how to find the true fundamental frequency. And it turns out that the true fundamental frequency is the lowest frequency that's in a signal, but it's one, not only is it the lowest frequency, it's one that has a full set of harmonic overtones on it. And that way you can actually determine the true fundamental frequency. So long story short is we moved away from the whole allopathic medical paradigm to this new paradigm that the ancient Greeks called it thesis, K-T-I-S-I-S, thesis, which is basically, instead of finding what's wrong and fixing it, this attempts to identify what's right and enhance it. Once you know the true harmony of a system and you can see what the harmony is, you can take that and you can enhance it instead of fixing what's wrong. So it is so wonderful. It's such a wonderful saving grace for therapists, because almost every therapist that I know that uses the allopathic method goes home every night feeling worn out, having to listen to all of this negative stuff that people are saying and everything. And what we have found is that I probably told you before, we had access to a world-class supercomputer that we do a lot of mathematical modeling on. And using that, we were able to prove that when you iterate the output of any system back into the input of that same system, it geometrically amplifies it. So what that means is if you get sick and you go to a doctor, you go to a therapist and you start telling them what's wrong, you're basically just amplifying the signal. You're actually feeding the output back into the input, and it can absolutely never go away. So how convenient is that for the medical profession? It's like a lifelong client. In fact, they call them patients. You know what the word patient really means? You know where it came from? It means um, it means uh, where's my brain?
This is where
It
I often
it,
just say, don't worry, it'll come
yeah,
when you not
it
to be
means suffering. It means someone who is going to do what they say and they're suffering.
long suffering. Okay,
Yeah.
now I have a question for you. How do you get to what is your methodology, what is your most present machinery, because I know you have so many inventions. How do you get to that person's, and what I call it is their divine blueprint when I do
Right.
sound.
Well, another major thing that we discovered was that we were studying the equation that defines a wave, a sound wave or a light wave. And that equation, we didn't make it up. This is a standard equation that all physicists and scientists use. It's called the complex wave equation. And what it says is that that complex wave equals the real times the cosines times the frequencies, plus the imaginary times the sine waves times the frequency. And I was blown away when I started really looking at that, because you can go online and you can do a search for sine wave and cosine wave, and you get millions of hits because it's used in pretty much every type of mathematics known to man. But if you go online and you do a search for those real and imaginary components, you don't get anything. So we started asking around, what are those? And the best we could ever get was that those are mathematical functions that are required to solve the wave equation. And I was like, okay, they're mathematical functions, but where do the numbers come from? Where do you get the information from? Well, they are mathematical functions that are required to solve the wave equation. That to me sounded like something had been seriously hidden from humankind. In fact, I started thinking about it and realizing, wow, when I was in school and they taught so much about sine wave and cosine wave, they never taught us anything that it had to do with a wave. They always taught it to us.
They don't want us empowered. They don't want us to understand co-creation.
Right.
And our military understands it. Many
Yeah.
esoteric, you're talking mystery school things that were passed down, and so that the right people in the right hands at the right time, which would be you, know how to work with these and solve them and hand it over to humanity.
Yeah. So I was just really, I was blown away by that so much that I decided just to put everything else to the side until I figured that out. What are these real and imaginary components inside of a sound wave? So long story short, we started just putting two and two together because it was obvious that they knew something about what I was talking about, but they weren't talking. And it was obvious that they knew a little bit about it because they called the real component the time component, and they called the imaginary component the spectral component. And I got to really looking at that hard, and it suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my God, what they're doing, what they're saying is that a human biometric can be separated into two components. One is the part that's coming from the instrument that they live inside of, and the other one is coming from the player of the instrument.
Consciousness, the light that they hold.
Yeah, the real component is the player. It's coming from how they think and feel about what they're saying. Like right now, when you hear me talk, part of what you're hearing is coming from my instrument, from my resonant cavities and my vocal cords and my other physical parts of me that make me sound like me. But that's only coming from the instrument. You're also hearing how I'm thinking and feeling about what I'm talking about.
Your
And
conscious
yeah.
guiding physicality, which is then creating a field which affects me sensorially and yourself, and we're sharing this reality.
Exactly. So I could leave that part out. I could leave the real part out and just talk with the imaginary part. But I'd sound like one of those guys in Battlestar Galactica who is a computer and has no inflection in the voice. Or I can make my voice really passionate, but that's really coming from how I'm thinking and feeling about what I'm talking about. And suddenly it was like, I got it. This is the main problem with human beings in the world, is that the instrument and the player are not fully integrated. And you can kind of look around and see the truth of that in any number of things, like whenever a musician is better integrated with their instrument, the outcome is better. The music is better. The
Oh,
same thing is true between like a driver and a vehicle or an operator and a machine. So I realized that every living thing has these two components. They have a personal side and they have an impersonal side. And whenever those two things are better integrated, the outcome is much more beautiful.
coherence. And this coherence actually moves the person into a oneness where they're working with divine forces and physical forces. And that's, you're describing the fifth dimension reality.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny too, because the physicists are now starting to see that the fifth dimension is phase. They know that the fourth dimension is time. So you have the three dimensions that we live in, then the fourth dimension is time, the fifth dimension is phase. And this is probably, if your listeners don't remember anything else that I say, remember that phase is going to be the next big thing in our industry. It has pretty much been just left out. Everybody talks about frequency, frequency this, frequency that, everything is a vibration. But frequency is just a minor component in the whole signal analysis scenario. Uh, the frequency is really just a carrier wave. So you and I have to be on the same frequency uh, for the information to go from receiver to from transmitter to receiver. But that's just the carrier wave.
And what is the phase where the intersection point of
Well,
that?
if you looked at a complex wave, like of say of a person's voice, it won't look like a little smooth sine wave. It'll be all jagged up and down, have all kind of peaks and valleys in it. Well, the relationship between all those peaks and valleys is where the information is. The frequency is just the carrier wave. The information is on the phase,
Yes.
and the emotion is on the amplitude. So animals don't communicate in the frequency domain. They communicate in the time domain. So I can say to my dog, I can say, come over here and let me beat the crap out of you, buddy. And he'll just run right over. Or I can say the opposite. I say, get over here and let me give you a big hug. He'll run off the other way. So they don't listen to words and frequencies. They listen to the way the amplitudes rising and falling over time. So my big teaching thing that I try to get across to people studying sound is that sound, like light and other wave phenomenon, have these three main components. There's frequency, there's phase, and there's amplitude. And to be able to really have a good look at what's going on there, you got to look at all three of those things, not just the frequency.
I've got a big question for you, and you touched upon it with talking to the dog. It's intentionality, and words sometimes get caught in the egoic, grid. One of the things that I've worked with, and one of my uh, assignments is to understand and work with light language as I meet people and help them understand their connection with their eternal home. And so I just kind of move into specific light languages. And so what you're saying is kind of describing the connections, the information, the words that come through are consonants and vowels, not of my volition and not of my understanding. So tell me what you know about light language, because this is the next step for people to understand. Caroline's doing a movie, A Tear in the Sky. We are not alone here. Many of us are assigned here and we're visitors, and by speaking light languages that bypass the logical mind, it does enable people to have connections, awakening, and activations they wouldn't otherwise have in their own language. So I'd love to hear your take on light language.
Uh, well, you've touched on so many subjects there. One of the Carolyn's a good friend of mine as well, and I've tried to get her. She's also a big producer of or works with the group that does Ancient Aliens.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I've tried to get all of them to distinguish between an evolutionary alien that evolved on another planet
Yes.
and came here, as opposed to a downstepping of the divine through various agencies that we call angels or whatever. There seems to be an agenda going on to convince everybody that it's all just evolutionary aliens from other planets.
Yeah, they lump it all
Uh,
together in a dramatic story fashion, but there really is specific information. Caroline, of course, is the font of this information, and I think she approaches things gently and with respect and groups and what people are ready to hear.
well, I agree with that, but I think that they're more than ever, they're ready to hear that the alien thing is only half the story, because there are aliens coming from other planets here that evolved on other planets, but there's also a downstepping of the divine through these various agencies. And those are two totally different things. And I would love anything to see an Ancient Aliens TV show about that addresses that. But you know what? They don't really want to. I went to the conference over in Pasadena and almost got kicked out of there trying to talk about it.
Now,
And so there's,
archangel beings here, people embodying archangel qualities, uh,
yeah.
working with the spiritual masters. And yeah, okay, good point.
So anyway, yeah, that's the big point I'd like to make there. Regarding the light technologies and everything, um, as I mentioned, we kind of really moved away from the whole concept of frequency, because again, it's just the thing that lets us communicate with each other. The actual information is on the phase. And when I mentioned earlier that the difference between the real and the imaginary in a person's voice, that is a matter of phase. One is the cosine waves and the other one is the sine waves. And it's really interesting how that's come down to us over the years, because if you get sick and you go to the hospital and they do any number of tests on you using their computers, whether they do brainwave studies or any kind of heart rate studies or any kind of metabolic studies, they only use the sine wave.
Oh,
They totally dump the cosine wave out the door. And the music industry does the opposite. They only give you the cosine wave, they don't give you the sine wave. So in both of those cases, there's absolutely one half of the whole picture missing.
okay.
And so again, how convenient is that for the doctors? You get sick, you go to the doctor, they fix the instrument, but they never tell the player how they messed the instrument up. So the player goes away and they messes the instrument up again, and they have to come back and fix it.
So, what do you
So
when a client comes in to work with you? Tell us about your center and your approach, and which machines you're using now, which technologies.
well, yeah, I'll start off just by saying, I'll give you an example. A person comes in to see me and I say, why are you here? They say, well, the doctor sent me because I've been to many doctors and they've said that I've got a tumor and I've got maybe 6 months left to live. And so they sent me to you. Can you help me get rid of this tumor? And my response is, well, obviously you've got some kind of problem. And part of that problem has now actualized inside of your body as that tumor. But what about the potential part of your problem? What about that? And they'll go, what? We have never been taught anything about potential. We only see the actual. So my response would be something like, well, the doctors may be right. You're going to die in 6 months. That would be one potential. But you may have a miraculous recovery. That's another potential. Or you make a discovery and heal yourself and write a book about it and heal thousands of other people. That's another potential. Or this event may be so traumatic that it gets your teenage son or daughter that's been strung out on drugs and you haven't been able to do anything about it. It may get them off. So the truth of the matter is that it's impossible for a human being to assign a positive or a negative to any kind of experience until that experience fully plays itself out. So the first thing that I do with my clients is I try to get them off of the actual and onto the potential. And I say, we're not going to ignore the actual. We're just going to put it to the side for a minute. And we're just going to focus right now on what is the potential that could come out of the situation that you're in right now. That alone gives them so much hope because they've been given no hope. They've been told it's only about the actuality of you having this tumor. It's nothing about the potential. Just to start thinking that there's some potential there gives incredible hope. And so the technology basically just takes a human biometric, like a voice. I'm convinced that the voice is better than the brain or the heart. And it takes that and it separates it into those real and imaginary components. And believe it or not, it's the same thing as actual and potential. The real is the actual, the imaginary is the potential. So now I've got their energy field, I've got it separated like that. Now I'm going to put one of those in this ear and the other one back in this ear, and I'm going to force the brain into resolving the difference between those two. It's very similar to everybody now knows about binaural beats, right? You have two different frequencies. You have 100 hertz over here and 107 over here. And you listen to this one, you go, wah. You listen to this one, you go, wah. But you put them together and you hear wah, 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 with that wah, wah being the difference between the two.
So is this
This, the
portico? Is
portico,
the
the
portico?
portico, the portico is very similar, only it would be technically binaural phasing instead of binaural beating. So in their case, they have separate frequencies in each ear, maybe just 2 or 3 frequencies in each ear. Whereas in our case, we have all the frequencies out of the biometric. There could be 20,000 frequencies coming out of a person's voice. And so I've got that separated. I got the imaginary phase going into this ear and the real phase going into this ear, and the brain has to resolve the difference in all those different combinations that are going on there with all those frequencies. So it's very similar to entrainment, but it's more expansive than that because it allows you to really get into your own energy instead of just coming up with some arbitrary frequencies and things like that.
And it's
And
mesmerizing to look at the colors of your voice in real time, this spectral colorization of your voice on the screen as you are saying what you wish to occur, and then any underlying unconscious secondary disbeliefs are being mitigated through. I mean, it's a fabulous, fabulous program.
yes, thank you. I was going to show you if I can find real fast. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
I think I need, let me see, I'm going to give you, whoa. Is this the vocal spectral analysis? Oh, I'm not hearing you now, Dawn. Maybe it's hooked into the,
How about that? You hear me now?
yes, and look at that. I love it.
Yeah, that we call this the fundamentalizer, and it is light years ahead of any other frequency program that I've ever written. And basically, it's doing a number of things here. As you're hearing me talk, you'll notice that it's actually notating the fundamental frequency of my voice on this piano string. And it's actually up here, it's actually finding the true fundamental frequency every time that I speak and notating that here on this keyboard. But you'll also notice that it is running that frequency up 40 octaves into the light range and assigning a correlated color to that key. And it's within 1 hertz of accuracy at the light range. So that's extremely accurate. It's not just red or green or blue or whatever. It's very specific shades of all those colors.
Oh, It's
And at
extraordinary.
this, and at the same time, right here, it's showing me whether I'm sharp or flat on that note. And over here, it's showing me what note I'm closest to. And it allows me to change the scaling here. So I could put this at A 442, 432 or 440 or whatever. So I can change the scaling of it and showing me the magnitudes and the phases of that. And here it's actually showing me the wave of my voice. That's actually showing me the actual wave structure of it. And then up here, it's actually listing each fundamental along with the first 12 overtones. So I've got a really, not just the fundamental frequency, I've got the full voice, all the overtones and everything captured here. And then, so what it does next is it makes the histogram of that down here on the bottom left, and where it's accumulating all those fundamental frequencies. And over time, I can see, like right now, I am mostly in the B note. Now, this is where it gets really technical, because my technology and my teaching and science of this is significantly different than what I've seen before, because most of the times when you see charts of the so-called chakras, for example, with the lower chakra being the root chakra and the crown chakra being at the top. And you always see it listed like this, where it's red at the bottom and then purple at the top. But you'll notice that the music notes are different here, which is something that never really made any sense to me. Why would they say that the root chakra is the red color, but if you take the C note and you run it up 40 octaves into the light range, you don't get red, you get green. And so I finally came to the conclusion, oh my gosh, you know what happened was that when Beethoven and them came up with the keyboard, and they came up with tempered scale so that all the octaves are exactly double the previous octave, where you have a line of different octaves that you can play from. What they did was they just arbitrarily decided that the music octave starts at the note C. But that can't be the case, because if you look at my chart that shows all the frequencies there, and you follow those frequencies all the way up to the light range, the very first note that shows up is an F sharp, not a C, and it's red. So they've got the colors right, but they don't have the music notes right. So to me, this more accurately represents the chakra system than what's been out there before. And so by watching this, you can get a really good look at where a person's energy is. Right now, I've got a lot of energy right in between my solar plexus and my heart, because I really want to get out really good quality information to you, but it makes me nervous to speak in front of other people. And I hate it. I don't really like public speaking, even though I get forced into it a lot. But I don't like it. So you can see my energy is predominant right here, right now. But this changes depending on what the person's talking about. So we can have a person speak about relationships, or jobs, or health, or finances, or anything like that. And you can really get a good look at their energy system by doing this. So then all of this information goes into our supercomputer when we do it. And then we can go into another room where we have the wave table and some of the other technologies that we have. And it already has the information there, so we can write programs based specifically on that person's energy. And what really makes this so nice is that, and let me show, for those that don't know, let me see if I can show you.
So where would they go to work with you on
Well,
that?
they can go on the website, for example, and find out different locations around where we do this all over the world. I'm probably in 20 different countries by now.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
but our main facility is here in Santa Monica. In
Okay.
fact, we've just recently opened up a new center called the Reality Management Center. And It actually serves as like a showroom for all of our technology and a therapy space for people that want to try the therapy. It's trying to open up the portico now. I'm wondering if Zoom basically has it blocked somehow, because it seems like it's not
What,
opening it up. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so
since I do happen to have it on my computer, thanks to you, I can open mine. Oh, there it is.
yeah, so let me lower the sound here a little bit. So basically, this program starts out right here with something that we call the portico.
I can't help it
And,
toning when I see it.
and so you can see it responding to your voice there. And
Ah,
this is just a typical Cartesian graph that has a vertical plane and a horizontal plane. And what we're doing here is each one of these pixels that you see there is a real and imaginary combination of one of the frequencies in my voice.
yes.
And so if something was like +2 real and +2 imaginary, it would plot up here somewhere. If it was minus real and minus imaginary, it'd plot down here somewhere. But so each one of those pixels is one of the frequencies in my voice, and the color is its phase, and the brightness is its amplitude. So here I have all three of those things that we mentioned as being important.
And I'm
Uh,
seeing the images, Dawn, because remember, I was trained. I'm seeing lots of hearts. I see a butterfly. I see an outstretched spiritual being, but mainly hearts and a few stars.
right.
That's who.
So we know just from the math of this that what we're looking at here is a time domain version of my voice. And what I would like to really see is I want to see, what does that look like on the other side before it becomes my voice? What is the geometry that's coming through my brain that's
Interesting.
allowing me to make these sounds? So
Oh boy.
to do that, we use another technology that basically revolves around diffraction. So if I take this image that you're looking at right now, and I use this like a filter, and I shine pure white light through each one of these little holes that are here, and I put a screen on the other side, I would
Yes.
get I would get this image. Come on.
Oh my goodness. Hey, no, wait, let's sing together a little bit. I thought that would be really fun. Just a little bit to see what, oh, yeah, that's the vocal profile, right?
Yeah, so we call this the spectral essence of a person, and I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure if there are beings on the other side, that they see things over here more like this than they do as physical objects. I see
I,
what kind of spectra do they project. And the interesting thing about this is that what we're looking at right now is the geometry
mm-hmm.
of the words before I spoke them.
Ah,
So that's why we call this a quantum biofeedback technology, is because you're actually looking at something that happened before you actually make the sound.
oh my.
And and here, if this was done on a person that had never done any work on themselves, the pixels just kind of randomly distribute.
Mm-hmm.
But the more work a person has done on themselves, the more geometry starts showing
It's
up.
like a mosaic. I'm seeing lots of patterns emerge and faces. There's Ganesha,
Yeah.
a
So
lot of,
this is like this y-axis right here in the center. This is the present moment.
mm,
Everything to the right of that is the future, and everything to the left of that is the past back here. So you can see most of my energy is right here in the present moment in this center column. Almost looks like a totem pole in there with little faces and images and stuff. And so there's so much that you can tell about a person by reading one of these things. It would take me a long time to really explain everything that I've seen right here. But I can really I've done this for so long now that I can really just listen to a person talk, and I can pretty much tell you everything about them. It's
yes,
pretty amazingly accurate what's in the person's voice. It's everything there.
yes. These are like training wheels, and over the years, I've worked with my intuition, and I've used these to add a kind of a backup, in a sense for my sense to really understand. And again, thanks for that ability to have the science to back up what I've been intuitively doing. Ooh, I see a star, a spider. Would you just
So,
humor me for a minute and we'll sing together on the other
okay,
screen?
okay, go
I
ahead.
though the other screen, I love the pretty one.
Oh, okay, the
Yeah, I love
portico.
that's the singing. That's the one. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll follow you.
Ah, it's just
So
so,
yeah,
it opens my heart to watch those
yeah,
images
yeah.
and they get richer and bigger. I just think sound really is. When you first began today, I said, I wonder if he's going to bring up the word psychedelic because I was talking to my sister today about sometimes people need a little bit of psychedelic work to flip a switch, but you've got music.
Well, have you ever heard my story about how all this started? I left that out when I was explaining this earlier,
No?
but let me give you the whole story.
Okay.
This was in my start in all of this came in the mid 60s. It was right before they made psychedelics illegal. And I was a chemistry major in college. So we were just making it in the laboratory, making LSD 25 in the laboratory. And I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I wanted to just live there, but it was obvious to me that there's a compensatory lag time and it robs you of some of your own neuropeptides. So you can't
Yeah.
keep doing it 24/7. So I made up my mind right then is I'm going to devote the rest of my life to coming up with a way that I can achieve that state of mind without having to pop the pill. And that's where all of my technology really originated from. And now I get so tickled almost daily. I have some young person come in and they try to tell me about the psychedelic revolution that's happening right now. And I'm like, no, that was like 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And we've learned how to do it without that now. In fact, most people don't remember that once upon a time, in evolutionary terms, we
Mhm.
were those plants.
Yes.
And the way evolution works is it always conserves order. So anything that it learns to conserve order, it remembers for the next generation that comes along. So we have the ability to make those chemicals right inside of here. There's a pharmacy in here, and we're the pharmacists. We could write a prescription to feel any way we want to feel. But
Yes.
most people won't do that. Most people will let somebody else or some situation that they're in write the prescription.
They let someone else's voice dominate their experience. I've often thought in the singing and work and sound healing, I remember that sound is the only thing that is unchanged from the heavenly realms to earth. The scientific anchors that you have in it are what is going to help our mass society, the consciousness, move together as a whole, that this is digestible, it's real, it's meaningful. And again, I love how you have supported and walked hand in hand with the divine feminine and people accessing these realms, not understanding the science, but using them with great efficacy.
But all of this is sound,
Oh my.
all of it. And that's what's so exciting to me about how we miss out a lot on things because we don't realize that the whole thing is basically just sound.
Much, much bigger than we can ever imagine, and more to come, but expanding day by day because of your diligence, your presence, and your courage to continue. I know it's not easy to have something cutting edge and even having government people come and question you sometime. I know
We've been told many times to not talk anymore.
you're dealing with a lot, but this is how we're moving forward. We're expanding, we're becoming the beings that you are imagining, and we're doing it as a village. So thank you for, again, for working with me, always being a pleasure to work with and available. I feel so fortunate. And today I get to bring all of your beautiful work out into the world. So, Don, I will be putting your contacts and information so people can find you and come to your different centers. And I want to congratulate you on your immense success.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's finally, like you said, the world's finally catching up with us. And this new reality management center is awesome. We're in the process of getting a grant. I had no idea that the U.S. military had a department for psychedelic research. Did you know that? And they've been putting these people with PTSD on a plane and flying them to Peru to do ibogaine and ayahuasca and all
Oh
that.
my
And,
goodness.
and they're having great success with it, but
Yes.
there's also some drawbacks to it. So we had the head of that department over recently, and he brought 25 vets with him and watched about 15 of them cry their eyeballs out while they were on the Vibrasound, and he couldn't believe it. He says, "I've never seen anything like that before. This solves everything. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's safer." So we've got a grant now working that hopefully we'll be able to show how this can. It's being called digital psychedelics. I call it technodelics instead of psychedelics, technodelics. And I'd love to share this with any of your listeners, especially if they're in the Santa Monica area. But
Excellent. Well, I'll be coming down to visit you. I'm going to be doing more traveling, working with women's circles, gaining support, using these technologies. My partner and I, we are stationed up here in the Pacific Northwest, and I must stop. Why? Because I had the lighting perfect, and I guess the sun's going down, and we talked a long time. And I also want to say the reason that I have worked with women's voices, when you said that you're anxious speaking in front of people, I used to have severe panic attacks. And I know that if people like you and I keep speaking truth, the world will change. So, anyone out there, I, I invite you to work with these technologies. And even if you are fearful, keep speaking up. Keep speaking up the truth. So, blessings and appreciation and a big hug. You're straight down the coast from me, and I will. I'm going to pull up, and maybe I'll bring a television camera, and we'll do a proper interview, show and tell in Santa Monica before you know it.
fantastic. You're fantastic. You'll love it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of new technologies you haven't even seen yet. I have a new digital simoscope that's going to blow your mind.
Everything blows my mind with you. Okay, this is interview one, and who knows, maybe we'll catch up again this year. Thank you, Don.
Beautiful. Thank you so
Just
much.
enjoyed it. Oh, I'm so appreciative. And I know the listening community. And I have these YouTubes are now tossed out like a ball by a special person that helps me in India. So thousands of people worldwide will be
Fantastic.
seeing this, not just my inner circle, my own tribe.
Beautiful.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Much love. Okay.
Bye.
Until the next
Bye.
time, keep up the good work.
You too. Bye.